So I thought this morning we could look for our eye. Buddha tells us that there isn't one that's specific and distinct and pointable and findable that runs the show like a boss. And he says that's the eye that we think is there, but he says it's an exaggeration. He says it doesn't, what we think exists doesn't exist. So maybe we can do a bit of a search. It sounds rather hilarious to search for your eye, but that's what we need to do. So first, just get ourselves steady. Body, remember the posture of the body. All the great meditators of the past have found that a certain way for the body to sit is most conducive, for good meditation. So we're just doing a few minutes, but we still remember the body. So the first is ideally, if you could have your legs in full lotus position, that's really excellent, because there's something very stable about that position. If you can do that. One time, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or I heard him say one time, that if you can start your session in full lotus position, that's really auspicious, For the more advanced practitioners, that's kind of important, apparently. But to have your body best, if you're sitting in a chair or sitting cross-legged, either way, but if you're sitting in a chair especially, don't slump into the chair. Don't sit back into the chair. Sit up. Hold your body upright. That's important. But as soon as we put our body upright, we get tense. So relax your muscles. Keep your body upright, but relax your muscles. That's the key. And your hands in the prayer, in the mudra, in your lap, in the meditation gesture, if you want, or just in your lap, relaxing. Your head slightly tilted forward, chin tucked in a bit, tip of the tongue resting behind the top teeth. And that, for the yogis too, has been found to be very practical. Especially if you're meditating a long time, it prevents you from dribbling. It prevents you from having to swallow your spit all the time. And then your eyes, looking down under your eyelids. Again, the great yogis, they say, because if they're meditating throughout the day, it's good to have the light coming in, but because they're so concentrated, they don't get distracted. But we get so distracted because we don't have good concentration. So maybe have your eyes looking down, as if you're looking along your nose towards the ground, but then have your eyes closed. That's the kind of classical position. So settle into that. And really, it's important to remember, because we're so addicted to our bodies. If our body feels good when we meditate, we think, oh, I had a good meditation. But that is absurd. Meditation has got zero to do with the body. The body, in fact, is a distraction. It's in the way. We're trying to get in touch with our mind. So what we'll do is, like we do according to Lama Yeshe in his book on Mahamudra, which is a way to realize emptiness. But the first part of the meditation, we'll do that first. Then we'll do the second part, which is looking for the eye. The first part is simply it's a concentration technique. So instead of the typical one, which would be to focus on the breath, which is another technique that Lord Buddha taught, we're going to focus on the mind itself. So that sometimes feels a bit puzzling. You'll see. We'll do a short session first, like about 4 minutes. So we're going to concentrate, and what we're going to concentrate on is actually your thoughts. Whatever thought pops up, you don't force a thought to come. You don't choose a thought. You don't make yourself think. Or if thoughts do pop up and you notice, you don't analyze them. You don't try to stop them. It's like you're watching television and but you're not going to comment. You're just going to watch with focus, with no commentary, no anger, no attachment, no annoyance, no, I wonder what that is. It's like that. And the television, of course, is your own thoughts. But oddly, you find when you try to focus on your thoughts, you can't find any. It's a very peculiar experience, you'll see. But when you settle down, the key object eventually in this meditation, it's actually called the clarity of your mind, which already implies you've got some focus. But don't even worry about that. So our first thing is we're going to focus. But before I say that, there's another part that's important to remember. There's different parts of your mind. So the part, the part that does all the chatting, that's all the bits that do the chatting. That's the anger, the attachment, the hurt, the jealousy, the kindness. He's chatting away, That's all the different delusions, mostly. We can have the good thoughts as well, of course. But the parts that do the work, I like to call them the mechanics of our mind. That's called intention, attention, discrimination, concentration, good memory. There's many of those bits. And these are the bits that we're trying to get to work in meditation. We're not, so the bit that does the looking, we don't notice it, but the piece of mind, the piece of your mind that does the looking, that does when we say pay attention, it's called literally attention. So we're going to pay attention with determination not to get distracted, not to space out. We're going to pay attention for this first bit, about 4 minutes. We're going to pay attention to whatever pops up in your mind with determination not to get distracted, not to forget what you're doing. But if you do wander off, just bring your attention back to the thoughts. That's it. Just watch your thoughts. Just keep your mind alert. Don't space out. Just focus on whatever pops up in your mind. So now with this, steady mind, If we were really sophisticated practitioners, our mind would be quite subtle by now. And then we could do the second part, which again would be more subtle, but we do it in whatever way we can. And that is, you know, as Lama says in his Mahamudra book, as we're continuing to focus on the mind, a small part of our mind, like a subtle wisdom, Lama Yeshe is sort of, Lama calls it, is like this subtle wisdom is then checking to see how this feeling of I that we have so strongly, how it exists. It really is quite subtle. But what we'll do is, like what Lama does, is we'll do a little search, okay? It sounds very strange. It sounds hilarious, in fact, to search for your I, you know. But the point is, Buddha's telling us that the I that we think is there, the way we respond, the way we feel, the way we think every day, it's a completely gross exaggeration. Buddha's never saying there's no I, but he's saying our view of, we exaggerate the I. We give it huge, much more power. We add things on top, as Lama Zopa says. And so one way we make the mistake, a very gross way we make the mistake, is if you think in terms of, you know, the Buddha says that everything exists interdependently. So one way that things exist is in dependence upon its parts. So here, this is the analysis we'll do now. It sounds so strange, but we'll just do it. When we think, if you think of yourself, you're made up of a body and you've got a mind. That's it. Buddha doesn't talk about a third component called a spirit or a soul, but that's the self. And we think there is that one. There's an extra piece there. So it's like you're made up of many pieces, aren't we? All the bits and pieces of the body, all the different thoughts. But we think there's another piece, an extra piece, that is literally called I or me, you know? And that feeling of that me, so real, runs our lives. It's why we suffer. It's because we believe there's this extra, definite, pointable, real me in there. Then because of that, we get attached to things because we're trying to make the me happy. Then we get angry when the me doesn't get what it wants. Then we get jealous and all the other dramas. They're all rooted in this fundamental, exaggerated sense of a self. And what Buddha has found is that I can't exist, doesn't exist. So, of course, we have to learn all the logic and do much debating in our mind and really learn and study it to use the words properly. But here, let's just think about it in a simple way. Think about anything, because every Buddha says everything exists like this. We exaggerate the status of everything. So if you think about even, say, we say the word, I'm sitting, or I'm holding a cup in my right hand, I'm walking. These are facts. You can see it. You can see somebody holding a cup in their right hand. So what we have to do is analyze the different bits that all play the role in order to find out what role does the I have? Because we believe it's there. There's no question. This is the most fundamental misconception that for the Buddha is the source of all suffering of all beings in the universe. And we give this exaggerated status to everything that exists. But because the I is such a powerful one, you know. So let's just analyze the bits. We're going to search for that piece. And the bottom line here in this discussion, in this meditation, in this analysis, if you think of something simple like holding a cup in your right hand, we know there's a hand, and if we look at the hand, we know there are the fingers, and then we look at the palm, and we know there are the ligaments and the nerves, all the many, many, many pieces that make up the hand. We know that. That's called all the different parts. One specific part of you is your hand, and there's many parts of the hand. So we know that the hand is holding the cup, but then we say, I am holding the cup, or my hand. We'll say, which part of you is holding the cup? We'll say the hand. And then we'll say, which part of your hand? The thumb, the little finger. Each piece does its job. So be analytical. Each piece does its job exactly, doesn't it? The thumb goes there, the little finger goes there, the ring finger does something else, the palm does something else. If you had to be really analytical, you could give quite a detailed description of the different parts of you called your hand, the job they do. Now, we believe, think about this, check it. We believe there's another piece that's the main one, the boss, that runs it all. And that's called I. So the question here is to ask ourselves, to check with our concentrated mind. If there is a separate piece, like a thumb is a separate piece, a ring finger is another separate piece, they're all separate, meaning you can point them out individually, and they've all got their job. We know that. The thumb doesn't argue with the ring finger saying, you're doing my job. Each bit does its job in the action called holding a cup. So now what job would this precious I do that the other parts aren't doing? What job is left over? Think about it. What job is left over? The thumb is doing its bit. Each piece works beautifully. But we are convinced, we believe without question, that there's a special part that we can find and point out. Because we say it, you know, I'm holding a cup, like there's a special piece in there. But what job does it have? Each piece of each finger does its job. The ligaments, the nerves, the skin, the palm. Then you get to the wrist and you keep going up the arm. All the bits do their job. Each piece is working beautifully to fulfill the action of holding a cup in your right hand. So what job is left over? That's a really good way to check. So I'll tell you, the first one that occurs to us, well, it's the part that runs it all to make sure it's all working properly. Well, the Buddha would say, no, you don't need that. Your mind does that. So which part of your mind is working here? Intention is the first one. I will hold the cup. Attention. You must pay attention each second to all the bits doing their proper job. And then concentration, because or good memory called mindfulness. They're all the parts of your mind that are involved in doing the job of holding a cup in your right hand. Because if the mind wasn't involved, you wouldn't hold a cup. You'd drop it. You'd be dead, you know. So the mind is the main player. If you want a boss among the two pieces called body and mind, clearly the mind is the boss. If you want a boss. The mind is there. You can point out the piece called intention. You can point out the piece called attention, intention, discrimination. Discrimination is the part of your mind that can distinguish between this and that. If that's not working, we're like an insane person. Concentration. If there's no concentration, you drop the cup. There's many parts of our mind, each, again, doing their specific job. And all those bits of our mind and all those bits of our body, because we've practiced holding cups in our right hand, so now it's instinctive, all work together, each doing their own function specifically. It's very technical. But we are still convinced there's another piece that's sort of the overseer, the boss. But what job would it do? Well, it doesn't need to do the job of overseeing. The mind does that. The mind does that. Intention is the thought, I will hold the cup. Then you pay attention, and then you concentrate, and you have good memory, and you discriminate. Each of those parts do their job, each part altogether. So the mind is the boss. And then in the parts of the mind, if you want a boss there, that's called intention. Every millisecond is the thought. That's what guides us. As Lama Zopa says, everything exists on the tip of the wish, the thought, I will. So the Buddha is telling us, not only is there not a separate piece called I, you don't need one. It's unnecessary. We've made it up. We've made it up, he says. So we never try to point out what this I is, you know. But there's just it functions at the level of the most primordial, deepest, most primordial assumption, which is why it's so puzzling to even think there isn't one, or to think we have to search for it. It's like laughable. We assume it's there. But so in the day, what we have to do is notice the symptoms of the belief in this intrinsic me. As Lama Yeshe calls it, the self-pity me. It sounds very cruel. But the more we understand this view, Buddha's amazing view of how things exist, the more we're going to notice that self-pity, not fair, poor me, victim, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. These are the thoughts that arise on the basis of the belief in this intrinsic separate me. It's the symptom of deep suffering. Of course, we don't think of it this way. It's not our Buddhist, it's not our, modern analysis. This is Buddha's analysis. So the only time we notice when the I is crying is when something bad happens, or somebody insults you, or you get offended, or someone really runs over you on the freeway. Then this feeling of I rises like a sleeping lion, and it sounds like it is, how dare you do that to me? Or if it's depression, it's this profound sense of I'm nothing. If it's self-hate, if it's attachment, these all are the delusions that arise as a result of the deep assumption of this intrinsic, concrete me. Finally, we need to get single-pointed concentration, Lama says. We cannot possibly realize the absence of this I. That's what the word emptiness means. It just means that what we think is there isn't. And we have to realize that absence. We have to realize it isn't there. That's what emptiness refers to. So that we can only realize that with deep, single-pointed concentration. It's not possible otherwise. But we can start somewhere, like little analyses like this, So we think for the rest of the day, we're going to watch our mind like a hawk. We're going to question all these false assumptions, because ego grasping is the name given to the wrong view in the mind that believes in this I. And then it gives rise to attachment to get what that fantasy I wants. And then anger arises when the attachment doesn't get what it wants. They're all utterly linked together. And they're all deep in the bones of our mind, and they're misconceptions. And the brilliance of Buddha's analysis is the precision that we need to use to identify each of these parts of our mind. This is what being a Buddhist is. This is when we really do the job properly. And this is why we must have concentration. So we do our best. So throughout the day, we watch like a hawk, checking how this supposed I exists. So there's our 27 minutes gone like a dream. We've used it well. So we delight in this, these seeds we've planted. So that's a really good way to do it. Try to do it in the day, when you're doing something. If you're washing the dishes, which part of me is washing the dishes? Well, the hands are washing the dishes, and the eyes look here, and the memory says, I did this one. All the bits of your mind and bits of your body all have their own job. So what you keep saying, what's the job of the separate bit called an I? What's its job? What job is left over? And you will find there is no job left over because there is no part called I, separate part. But there is an I. This is the tricky bit. Then we get crazy. But it's not the way we think. It's more subtle, more nuanced. As Lama Zopa says, when we've realized that emptiness of the intrinsic I, the separate I, it's as if there's no I, but there is an I. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't. This is the view of the yogis who've realized this, This is putting together the two truths, dependent arising and emptiness. Changchub semchog rinpoche, ma kye panam ke gyochig, ke panyampa me payang, gong ne gong du pavasho. Gewadi Nudodag, Lama Sange Drugyone, Drowa Chikyang Malupa, Dei Sala Gopasho. Goodbye, everybody, sweethearts.
Thank you very much.